Hello. We've got an extra large weapon to look at today, probably the biggest one I'll ever cover, and that's because it's a fort. This is the Castillo de San Marcos in St. Augustine, Florida, and this is a rarity for the United States because you can go see a 17th century stone fortification. It was designed and built in 1672. This is a Spanish fortification, changed hands a lot, but it was a Spanish fortification from when they controlled the state of Florida, and it gives you control over access to the bay. So any ships trying to come in to St. Augustine, which was a really important, early settlement and trading center, was going to get pounded by cannons from this fort here. It's an example of a bastion type fortification, and the short story on that is after the advent of gunpowder, castles and forts had to change because the walls didn't do a very good job of standing up to the pounding. So there's a lot of angles on it meant to deflect cannonballs and take a lot of the sting out of them. So they're kind of star-shaped. So here's a view of the gate, and you can see that you're going to be in trouble if you try to storm this thing, right? There's, a bridge, but that's not that big of a deal because obviously it's not very high up. The main thing is I'm looking here from one tower, and you can see the opposite tower, and people from both would be firing directly into the flanks of whoever's trying to get into that gate. And you can't see, but over to the left, there's also a gatehouse. So you'd have to fight your way through that. Then you make your way here, and in theory you could be receiving fire from 3 different fronts, if not 4 if you want to count the wall straight up top. And that was the thing about castle design, right? You're making the opposing force pay a steeper and steeper price the closer they get to trying to storm this thing. So you're getting fired on from a distance. It's more intense as you get closer, and then much more importantly, now you're kind of outflanking your opponent just by virtue of the fact that they've gotten that close to your walls. Now that's a truly ancient strategy, and it's stuck around so long because it works, and angles still matter, whether it was sling stones, arrows, or musket balls. Doesn't matter. It still helps to have turned the corner on your enemy. And that was the part of the castle with its back to the water, because that's where the main gate was. So here's the other side. You can see the fortifications facing the water, and you get a better idea of the height here involved. And again, you can see the design. Somebody standing exactly where I was when I took this picture has an easy shot into anyone trying to scale that wall that we can see, or make an attempt there. So someone trying to get to that wall would be facing fire in their left flank, in addition to whoever's attacking them from above. You can also see the moat, of course. It's not very deep, and it was not filled with water as far as I heard on the tour or any of the reading I did. And as I understand it, most moats, in fact, never were filled with water. It was just kind of a defensive ditch. Allowed you to see if anyone was trying to tunnel under. If somebody tunneled under, let's say 50 yards off to the right from this picture, and was working their way to the wall, then they're going to emerge in the middle of the moat. So it's a nice early warning system. And it's just another physical barrier. You've got to scale down into it. And here's the native limestone that was used, and it's a particular type. It's called coquina, or it was by the Spanish, and it was their only choice. And it might not look like a good one because it's porous. It's funny, too. You can see the actual little seashells in there. It's all they had, so it's what they made the fort out of, and it turned out to be a great material. Since it's filled with holes, it actually has room to compress. So it's got kind of an elasticity to it, as the British found out, and they were very frustrated because their cannonballs would either bounce off of it or just get kind of absorbed into it. Think of like the target that you shoot arrows into, for anybody who's familiar with that kind of thing. It's kind of this foam, and the arrows just stick in there because, again, it has room to compress. So pretty amazing. It's accidental choice, accidental benefit, I should say, but it served the defenders very, very well. Here's a view looking down into the central courtyard from one of the corners. And speaking of its defense, the British tried to take this twice in 1702 and 1740. Neither one was successful, so the designer, Ignacio Daza, did a great job. And again, St. Augustine was very important geographically, so it was a coveted location, and this fort here did a great job of helping the Spanish maintain control for as long as they did. That second assault, the one in 1740, actually involved a full 7 ships, too, trying to bombard this thing, and it still held up. So the town would suffer, be put to the torch. They couldn't control that, but the residents would crowd in here and just wait it out, keep returning fire and wait for the Spanish Navy to arrive and raise the siege. So here's one of the towers. As you can see, you're protected if you crawl, or at least crouch, then you're protected on your approach to the tower, and that's where a sentry is going to sit and watch. He's got a observation and firing hole. That is, of course, on one of the extreme points of the castle and one of the ones looking over the water. And once you were there, either for regular guard duty or during a siege, this is the view you would have. So I had that one observation hole. It didn't have like one in the center, one to the left, one to the right. But from here you can get a good view, and you can maneuver your rifle to get a pretty broad range of targets. That'd be some hazardous duty. I wouldn't enjoy being in that spot, but it's a great view. This place is a U.S. national monument, by the way. I should have mentioned that. It definitely deserves to be. It's just packed with history. Great tour as well. So, here's one of the cannons. As far as I could tell, all the cannons are the real deal. You can see the inscriptions, the year, dedication to royalty, that kind of thing. But I don't think they were all originally from the fort, based on what we saw. Still, gives you a great idea of what the armaments would have been like, and surely most of these are from the actual location. The rarest type they had was this kind of short, stocky, high-angled mortar. So the idea here is to, send the ordnance up at a high angle so it comes down on your enemies. And here's another view of that gun to give you an idea, right? So there's that high arc, and if that lands on your head, you're going to be in trouble, and you're taking fire from a couple different, directions or vectors, if you will, by having different kinds of cannons on the walls. And like I said, this was a coveted spot and a well-designed fortification, so it saw plenty of action, and it changed hands a lot. This went from, it was built by the Spanish, it went from the Spanish to the British via treaty in 1763, back to the Spanish, and then to the U.S., again via treaty. So, changed hands plenty of times. It got used during the American Revolution as a prison. It got used as a prison more than once, and I'm sure it was not a very pleasant one if you weren't allowed to leave the dank little quarters that we saw on the inside. You would not have done well. The interior was really fascinating as well. They have the powder room, and to get to the powder room, you actually have to get down and crawl. So we've got this interior vault, and they didn't even have a normal-sized door. I would imagine the idea there is that obviously you want to keep that powder dry and from exploding, so you're just limiting access as much as possible, even to the point of kind of making almost a hole that you have to crawl through to get in there. Here's one of the other guns, and I think you can get a good idea of the size if you look at the opposite wall over there. That gives you a pretty good indication, and you can see the people on there for scale. So it's big, but it's what we would think of as a fort more than a castle, even though the name is officially, Castillo Castle. So there's the flag that flew when Spain built and controlled this thing. It's a really fascinating site, very underrated and not as well known as it should be within the States. The Castillo de San Marco in St. Augustine, Florida. Thanks.